Let's start with just a first, few of these.
Sure. Let's
Number
do it.
one, we are the common denominator. And then igniting
Right.
your inner coach, number two. Number
Yes.
three, I wrote these down. Perception and interpretation equals your reality. Let's just stop there.
Sure. Yeah.
For the first three here. What are some key points that listeners should take away,
You
either
bet.
on, the first one, we're the common denominator.
Okay. So this is the idea that in a very real sense, there is nothing about our lives and how we perceive reality that doesn't start with us. In other words, even the things that we perceive as happening outside of ourselves, right, are actually mediated by our own perception, our own brain, and our bodies, right, at a sensory level. So that's kind of the science piece of it. But the practical piece of this, where I saw this coming into play in people's lives, is there would be times when I would meet with leaders or individuals who I was coaching, or even really myself, where there might be that tendency to take a victim mentality of, oh yes, it's always somebody else's fault, or if it were only for this or that, or it's kind of the shoulda, woulda, coulda, but it's this sort of mental attitude that needs to shift as we become more emotionally mature as humans, that, actually, I am accountable and I have agency. It should be empowering to think, wow, just because bad things happen or unexpected things happen, which honestly happens every day we're alive, we have the ability to interpret and react and respond in a more skillful way. So it's noticing in ourselves when we might be pointing the finger outwards, and we need to turn that finger right on back inwards and say, where can I have agency in this situation that I'm not enjoying for one reason or another? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the symphony conductor who it's not an issue within the orchestra. They look within themselves first.
Right. Yeah.
Same type of thing here. But the second point, when you talk about igniting your inner coach,
Yes.
I'm curious, from all the work that you do, how many people have the capabilities,
Sure,
from your observations, to be their own coach? Like
Yeah.
you yourself are an expert in the field. You've had your own coach.
Yeah. True.
A lot of people can't go outside and
Right.
reach into their pocketbooks to say, I'm going
True.
to hire a coach.
Yeah.
But you know what? You can look inward yourself. You can look
Correct.
and be, you can be your own inner coach first.
That's
Talk
right.
about that for a minute from your perspective.
Sure. So it's a multi-layered question you ask, so I'm going to tackle it that way. First of all, it's true. We each do have natural proclivities that either incline us more towards this ability or less towards this ability. And it hinges on a few things. How aware am I to begin with, between how big is the delta between how I perceive myself and how others experience me or my reputation? And the greater the delta between those two things, it means that person doesn't really have a grip entirely on their impact, or what George Colreeser at IMD talks about as the person effect. What is that person effect? And then in turn, what's your ripple effect, or the impact you're having, those behaviors and how you show up. So a person who is able to look inwards and understand that connection between their actions, thoughts, how they're showing up, and how they make other people feel, they're usually more inclined towards this ability. But working with the coach, while not everybody can afford that, it often is really important to be able to have people in your life who are your advocates, whether you call them a coach or not, to reflect back to you the things you are blind to, the things you don't see about yourself, so that
Right.
you can bring those things into sync, right? That's one element of it, Leo. I'll pause in case you have questions.
Yeah,
There's
no,
another element, but
I like the fact, because you deal with so many people, Michelle, we have these blind spots.
yeah,
We all have. I've had my
still
blind
too.
spots.
Yep.
I think the difference is we talk about feedback as a gift, right? You want to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And I think what you just described there visually with the gap of perception versus interpretation. It
Yeah.
sounds like the wider it is, that we better start reading your book because we got to bring it into a little narrower focus here.
Yeah.
Am I hearing that right? I mean, it's
You
like
you are.
the
You are.
closer that perception and interpretation come into play, probably the more we are on top of our game, understand how we're being received by others, what our
Right.
reputations are,
That's
and
right.
we got a better handle on who we really are and how people really maybe interpret our value
Exactly.
to the marketplace and things like this.
You're absolutely right, Leo. And I think,
Yeah.
I know you do a lot of this work with, your clients as well in your own way. And it's critical. Yeah, I don't care what role you have or level you are in any company. Um, these skills are critical. You know, they are the differentiating skills because you could have a fabulous education, you could have a fabulous resume, you could be the cream of the crop, so to say, and show up and have this delta of understanding or lack of
Yeah.
awareness. And
Right.
it's
Right.
it could either be a showstopper or it could be the thing why your client chooses the other person or the other,
Yeah.
option, right? And so um the other element to igniting your inner coach, and I talk about it in a fun kind of metaphorical way, as la chispa, and that's a Spanish word for flame or spark. And so we each have drivers and motivators that intrinsically drive us, means, you know, the worst thing could happen tomorrow and we're still going to be driven by this thing, right? And that's different for each person. There are similarities and commonalities, of course, but it's unique. And so knowing your chispa, where's your fire? What's that inner fire? And
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
able to connect again and again to that, because I can tell you, like, at one point in my life, and I think this is normal actually. I had 4 kids and they were little at that point, and I had this big career and I lost that from myself. It smoldered. It's like I forgot, like, who's Michelle? What's really feeding me? What's making my life bigger, and where is Michelle in this mix? And so I think this is the other element. If we're not feeding or don't even know what that fire is of what we want, we better go figure that out. We better go take a pause and connect with what gives us that inner strength. That's the source of the inner coach, as well as your own capacity to be aware.